Welcome back to The Healing Habit, where we talk about the importance of healing and how to make it a part of your everyday life. I'm your host, Cassie,
And I'm Renatha.
and today we're going to be talking about who are we really impacting by holding on to an offense?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, because I think a lot of times when we are dealing with the emotions and the actual knowledge of what's happened, we have a feeling about what holding on to the offense really is, what we think it is, how we're experiencing it, but in reality, something else is happening. We've alluded to this in some previous podcasts, but we're going to sort of delve into this. And part of that is the false accountability of unforgiveness,
Right.
right? And so being stuck in this place of thinking that something is happening when in reality, what we believe is going on actually isn't. Something actually much more detrimental to us is happening in that process.
Right. This was one of my favorite things that you've said on this podcast so far. Like when you said it to me the first time, I think I was like, "Can you say that again?" Because I was like,
Yeah.
my life is changed now. Because we think that we're holding somebody accountable by just not letting them move past the hurt.
Yes. Yes.
But really all we're doing is probably hurting them and hurting ourselves, you
Yes.
know?
Well, and I would submit to you that we're actually not hurting them at all, right?
Really?
Because that process of unforgiveness, that is when we acknowledge the offense, when we understand the emotions that are happening to us, all of that's internal.
Right.
That's happening to us as the individual
Mhm.
as we are holding on to what we're experiencing. And if you think about this in terms of, as we've mentioned previously, constantly holding on to offense, disconnecting from people, sweeping it under the rug, shoving it into a room where we're not actually dealing with it. If we continue to do that over and over and over again, who's really being impacted by that?
Yeah.
We are,
Yeah.
right? But we falsely believe that the person who we're holding the offense against, that they're being impacted by what is happening inside of us.
Mhm.
Because in our brain, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because I'm angry at them. I've been hurt by them. I'm frustrated with them. And as I am thinking about them, we believe that our thoughts and feelings towards them are having an impact on them directly, but they're only impacting us.
So, as someone who is currently on the other end of this right now, there is someone in my life who um is holding me accountable for something or thinking that they're holding me accountable, but they're really just acting in unforgiveness towards me.
Mhm.
Um and this has been going on for years.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's not somebody that I'm gonna cut out of my life because it would require a huge life change. But it's also like that does kind of sting a little bit. So
Right.
that's why I'm having a hard time grasping onto that because
Yes.
as someone who is being impacted by that, it just kind of it's frustrating. At the same time, I'm also like sad for that person because I'm like, wow, like you're really choosing to just kind of be upset and miserable.
Yeah.
But it's also sad because I just want to operate in peace, you
Yes.
know?
Okay. So what you're describing is being impacted by the behavior of that person, not their internal process.
Right, right,
Because
right,
we're
right.
talking about
Mhm.
two different things,
Right,
right?
okay.
So as the person who, let's say I'm the person who's holding on to an offense, right? You Cassie, you said something so mean and you hurt me so deeply.
Mhm.
And so when that process happened, I'm holding on to that anger and that offense. But here's the truth. If you hurt me that badly, I'm probably not spending that much time with you,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
If I have these levels of emotions, I'm going through my life every single day holding on to this offense, ruminating on it. You're not with me every single second of the day.
Right.
Right? And those times when I'm alone and I'm away from people and I'm focusing on the feelings that I'm experiencing in that moment, you're not there while that's happening.
Right.
Now, I can have an interaction with you that in my because of what I've been ruminating on and because of the unforgiveness that's at my heart, I can then expose you to behaviors that are a reflection of my internal process.
Right.
But the majority of what I am experiencing is mine. And there are times when I can then retaliate because of what's happening, but those times are actually not happening constantly.
Right.
So ultimately, my ability to manage and deal with these feelings, I'm the person who's going to have the greatest level of impact.
Mm.
And when I recognize that I'm the one that's being impacted most negatively, while there are flashes or small snippets of time when I'm able to express my anger and frustration, that's not going to be always.
Right.
And ultimately, I am the person that is going to be most deeply impacted by holding on to these feelings and emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're pointing out so beautifully is that I'm not being hurt by the unforgiveness. I'm being hurt by the action
Yeah.
that is coming from that,
Yes.
which are two separate things. Um, I want to talk a little bit about how to interact with those types of people who are holding on to that grudge towards a person, like towards you.
Yeah.
And like, do you, because I know for me, I'll run through like the entire spectrum of like, I'll try being really nice to them. I'll try ignoring them too. Like at a certain point, I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna be mean to me, I'll be mean to you. Like
Yeah.
I I resist that. But that's how it feels at a certain point. Like I'm running into a wall so much. I have to interact with this person because it's not worth losing a job over or leaving a job over. But at the same time, it's like, man, this person makes my daily life kind of miserable.
Yeah.
And I don't want to interact with them like that anymore, you
Yes,
know?
I know exactly what you mean, and I think all of us to some degree have experienced this, right? Where
Mhm.
we are in a relationship with someone who has an offense against us, real or imagined, because it doesn't matter because their perception is their reality.
Mhm.
If they believe that there is an offense, whether you did it or not, they can respond to you and have unforgiveness in their heart for this real or imagined offense.
Yeah.
And as we learn how to connect with people, it goes back to that conversation that we've had about conflict management.
Mhm.
And in most cases, if we have an interaction with someone who's negative and they are making life difficult, the scenario you described is probably a pretty accurate one for most of us, that get sort of caught up in their feelings and emotions. But this is where we get to confront behavior rather than acting like it doesn't exist.
Wow.
Because in our desire to sort of make it go away, we can overcompensate. So if they're angry at us, I want to be really nice to you. So maybe if I'm really nice to you, you'll stop being really mean to me, right?
Mhm.
And so, or we try to ignore and to create distance, or we try to avoid,
Yeah.
or we retaliate or respond in kind. If
Right.
you're going to be rude to me, then I'm going to give you the exact same energy right
Yeah.
back.
Mhm.
And so, but in neither of those examples was there ever a confrontation of the behavior
Mhm.
and saying, "Hey, I'm noticing that, some of the behavior, the way you're acting towards me is kind of negative. Can we talk about it? Can we
Yeah.
talk about what's happening?"
Yeah.
And understanding that just because we have a conversation doesn't mean that it is going to lead to reconciliation.
Right.
Because I can have feelings about how you're treating me, and I can say, "Listen, I understand that you may be angry at me and you may not be ready to forgive me, but we have to learn how to work together in a way that is going to be productive." So, if you have those feelings, that's fine. But I have a boundary about how I'm going to be treated.
Yeah.
And your response to me is inappropriate, and I'm no longer going to be able to continue to operate in connection with you if you're going to continue to respond in this way.
Yeah.
And so being able to say that if you're going to continue to respond this way, then I'm going to have to limit our interactions,
Yeah.
right? We're going to have a third party enter into our interactions to be
Mhm.
able to act as mediator.
Yeah.
So it isn't necessarily that you have to walk away, but you can shift or change how you interact to be able to manage what's going on with them so that you can have peace in the situation.
Yeah, because I think part of that also feeds into, well, that person's always acting that way. So now I'm operating in unforgiveness, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how this turns into a cycle of, well, I guess it's not funny, it's serious.
Yes.
Um, but about how it turns into a cycle of, okay, that person's not forgiving me and now I'm struggling to forgive them because this is an open wound that keeps getting reopened.
Yes.
So now how do I close that wound and realize that's just how this person is interacting with me,
Yeah.
and that's not on me. I've done everything that I could to even just operate in peace with this person.
Mhm.
So I need to now just accept that that's how that person is, keep them on the way outer circle.
Mhm.
Like I was kind of describing that as like that's the associate level.
Yeah.
Like you walk by them, you might say hi, how's the weather, but that's
Mhm.
it. And then just kind of moving forward in your life, because I do think that even something like that where somebody is holding you in jail in a sense, or they think that they're holding you in jail
Yeah.
by just refusing to forgive the offense, now you're also holding yourself in jail because you're refusing to forgive their offense.
Exactly. So to your point, it does create this cycle
Mhm.
where they are the injured party, real or imagined, and then they in turn begin to injure you.
Mhm.
And you have a decision to make. Am I going to step into this cycle and allow this to continue where I'm going to be constantly taking offense? Or am I going to deal with this person based on what I know about them?
Right.
Am I then going to be able to respond knowing that creating offense and injury is how they're moving in the world? So
Mm.
I have the ability in that moment to guard my heart
Right.
and to be able to say that this is the behaviors that are acceptable and being able to have conversations.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to understand when someone is unwilling to listen to us. And this is when we get to bring another party into the conversation, someone who can be an intermediary or a go between, who can facilitate a conversation that can lead to some expectations on how we're going to interact moving forward.
Mhm.
Because that person absolutely has the right to hang on to the offense. But what they don't have the right to do is to continue to hurt you and harm you. So it is about creating boundaries or standards on how we're going to interact and being able to then have another party there to be able to say, this is what we're going to be able to do to create a cohesive environment so that we can get the things done that we need to get done.
What you're saying too is reminding me of something from my childhood.
Mm.
Um, this is kind of a funny story now, but um, I think growing up, you kind of deal with people who are just learning how to interact because you're all little humans and you're all offending each other in some way, but we don't have the emotional maturity to respond to it. And I remember that there were some situations at school growing up where um I felt that people were not nice to me. Now, like you said, real or imagined,
Mhm.
right? And I think I didn't understand forgiveness, probably understandably being 10 years old. And so I would kind of operate in this way where I would come home and just be so disheveled and like derailed because this person said this to me or whatever. And my mom had gotten me a book and was trying to help me learn how to like manage conflict like this. And one of the things that I learned was um, if somebody's being rude to you, you look them in the eyes and you say, "Does that make you feel good to make me feel bad?" And I was like, "That is gold. I'm going to use that." And so, you know what I did, Renatha?
Yeah.
I went to school the next day and I was ready. I was looking around like, "Somebody try me. Somebody try me. I have the best response in the world."
Yeah.
And so, inevitably, somebody probably made some kind of joke that probably wasn't offensive at all. And I went, "Does it make you feel good to make me feel bad?" And it was one of those moments where now looking back on it, I realize in operating in the lack of forgiveness, I was looking for scenarios that would offend me.
Yes.
And in that, I was holding myself in that prison. And
Yes.
so it's kind of funny when we're talking about how, okay, acknowledge the offense, identify the emotions, and then realize like, who am I actually impacting by
Yes.
holding on to this? Well, all those times that those people had hurt me, I then was holding on to it and it hurt me instead
Yes.
because then everybody was like, "What's she talking about? I was just making a joke about her shoes, or whatever." And yeah, I just thought it was funny. I was just like, "Man."
Well, here's the thing, Cassie. You just gave an example of how so many adults walk
Yeah.
around every single day.
Mhm.
That 10-year-old example of being able to now have sort of cataloged all these offenses and you walk around looking for the next one because
Mhm.
you have an expectation that it's going to happen
Yeah.
again. And even if it doesn't happen, you create it.
Yeah.
And so many people live in their lives walking around like that every day
Yeah.
because they have these unresolved feelings and emotions. They don't understand that these offenses are ultimately tainting how they see the world.
Mhm.
But there is a reverse side to this, is that as we begin to understand that our behavior and how we're responding to these offenses and unforgiveness are negatively impacting us, when we choose to release them and become more forgiving people, then the world around us begins to change.
Yeah.
How we respond in a relationship begins to transform
Right.
because we're no longer looking for the next offense, but we're also and always looking for the next opportunity to move forward in healing and wholeness. And
Wow.
just imagine what would happen in the world of each one of us decided today that I'm going to choose to become a more forgiving person, that I understand that holding on is going to impact me negatively.
Yeah.
Imagine what would happen and how we moved and operated with each other.
Yeah.
We would be a grace based, compassionate society because we would then be asking people or treating people the way we would want to be treated.
Yeah.
And we would be extending that grace. We would be free to forgive, and it would impact everything about all of our interactions. We'd be
Mhm.
kinder in traffic when somebody cut us off
Yeah.
because guess what? You're going to cut somebody off in
Yeah.
traffic. So you would be willing to extend to someone what you want in return. We'd be more gracious in our relationships. It would lead to greater connectivity because we would be more understanding, we'd be more kind, we'd be more compassionate because that is what we would want in return.
Right. Absolutely. And also realizing too that like just because we have the emotional maturity to do that doesn't mean that everybody else does. And
Yes.
I think too, with that comes grace because we need to all recognize that nobody's perfect and we are all messy human beings that are all working on learning how to operate in the daily life, you know?
Yes.
And so I think like a great example, I'm full of examples today.
I love that.
Um, like a great example is you're in a job scenario where somebody is being challenged in their job to be at a higher level, to maybe be in more roles of leadership than they're used to. Well, now we have to operate with grace, recognizing they may not handle every situation the best because they're learning.
Yes.
And it's funny because I remember I was in a scenario like this where there was somebody who was placed in a position of leadership and she was just kind of interacting with the people around her like she was better than everybody else, and I didn't like her attitude. And so for the whole first half of the year, like 6 months, I was like, who does she think she is?
Mhm.
And then I got placed in that position of leadership and I was like, this is hard.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was kind of struggling with the same things. And I actually went up to that person and was like, you know what? I really struggled with this with you for the beginning of the year. And I realized that your role was hard. And I want to apologize to you because I may not have responded well in that situation.
Yeah.
But I'm sharing that as an example to hopefully help other people who are listening to this podcast realize that everybody is in a unique scenario that if we were in that scenario, we might be facing some of those similar struggles.
Yeah.
And we do need to operate in grace, recognizing that, like, it's not easy to be in leadership or it's not easy to interact when you have all these additional pressures on you.
Yes.
And and I think just recognizing that, like, by continuing in offense, you're actually making it harder on yourself because you're going to be now looking for reasons for that person to have offended you, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thinking about this in terms of context,
Hmm.
that if I recognize that I'm going to fail and I'm going to fall short and
Hmm.
I'm going to make mistakes at some point in my life, because none of us are perfect, we're all going to make mistakes. When I acknowledge that, then it makes it easier for me to release those emotions and offenses because I'm going to be on the receiving end of some, or at least I hope I'm going to be on the receiving end of somebody's compassion in the future.
Mm.
So as I understand and recognize that holding on to the offense and holding on to the emotions are ultimately impacting me, that they're going to cause me to show up in the world in a way that doesn't align with my version or view of myself, then it empowers me to be able to say, I don't want to be that person. I
Right.
don't want to be the kind of person that would treat myself in a way that's negative. So why would I treat others in that way?
Yeah.
It creates space for us to move towards forgiveness and to allow this whole process to move forward without resistance,
Yeah.
because we want to be better people. We want to be healing. We want to be kind. We have an internal image of ourselves that sometimes our behaviors don't necessarily align with. But when we recognize who we want to become and what holding on to these emotions and these offenses is actually creating, it gives us the space to step into the identity we want to embrace.
Yeah. And something that's making me think of is also forgiveness of self. Cause I want to understand, like, how does that apply? So in a situation where, like, you and I are in conflict, and I'm recognizing, okay, by holding this grudge against you, I'm actually impacting myself. Now I am mad at myself. I'm having a hard time recovering from this scenario because I know that I fell short. And I have a tendency to be really hard on myself in that kind of scenario. So I'm sure that there is a lot of forgiveness of self that needs to happen, right?
Yes.
And so it's kind of like in that scenario, how do I move forward recognizing I'm actually hurting myself by doing that because it's so weird. Like, this is like a
Yes. Well, because
matrix.
because we are being impacted
Yeah.
by our choices.
Right, right, right.
And so as we're moving forward in the forgiveness model, this is just one step in the process,
Yeah.
because ultimately the goal is for you to be able to release these emotions so that you can be free.
Yeah.
So by acknowledging what you're feeling in that moment, as you acknowledge the offense, you identify the feelings and emotions, you are now making this determination that you're being impacted by holding on. We move right into the next step, which we'll talk about in the next episode, is who you could be if you release these emotions. Right?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that, because when you understand that holding on to these emotions can impact your identity, it can impact how you show up in the world and in relationships, it gives you the ability to let go and forgive completely.
Yeah. Because I think we often are like, well, I deserve to be in that prison, or I deserve to not have any friends, or I deserve blah, 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 blah. And we actually create that for ourselves.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just I can quite literally remember being in high school where, insecurities at an all-time high, and I've had past hurts that I hadn't healed from, of, the stuff that happened when I was 10 years old,
Yeah.
and walking around with this fear of rejection, so much so that I would quite literally just avoid people altogether. Like, I was like, I will take any opportunity I can to be alone because I don't want to give people the opportunity to hurt me. So that's a great example of quite literally holding ourselves into a prison
Yes.
because we're like, I'm protecting myself. But in actuality, I was hurting myself, right? Because I didn't give anybody the opportunity to be friends with me. So you
Yes.
think you're protecting yourself from a negative thing, but you're also protecting yourself from a positive thing, which is, what if people say yes? What if people do accept you? What if people do want to be your friend? And that being something that I've had to walk through, learning how to rewire my brain into thinking, well, what if I walked into a room and I thought everybody here wants to be my friend? What if I walked
Yes.
into a room and I thought everybody wants to hire me? That kind of stuff. We get rid of this negative self talk, and it's now, who could I be?
Exactly. And we get to engage with this in this positivity, which will lead to transformation in all of our relationships and interactions. And that's
Yes.
what we'll get to talk about in the next episode.
That's amazing. And what a great segue. I just want to say again, thank you all for listening to this episode of The Healing Habit. Next episode, we're going to be talking about who could I be? And I'm really excited about that episode because I want to learn who I could be, if I just let go
Yeah.
of the hurt and the offense. We're all working on just becoming a more forgiving person. So, anyways, thank you guys again so much for listening to this episode. If you're interested in taking that next step, you want to dive deeper into your healing habit, or you just want some professional help, there are some links in the description down below. We'd love for you guys to check them out. Again, I'm your host, Cassie,
And I'm Renatha.
and we'll see you guys on the next episode of The Healing Habit.